It looks like Tim Cook and Apple may have just won the AI race, positioning themselves ahead of giants like Meta and Google by refusing to play the same game as everybody else. Look at this chart. It shows capital expenditure for all of the biggest tech companies in the world. Put simply, it's the money that the biggest AI companies are spending on building out data centers, buying GPUs from Nvidia, and all of the infrastructure that you need to train and run AI. And in over a decade of working in technology with some of the biggest companies in the world, this is like the craziest thing I've ever seen. Amazon, 42% up year over year. Microsoft, 89% up. Alphabet, 95%. Meta, 48%, whereas Apple is down 19%. In 2025 alone, these companies spent over $400 billion on capital expenditure, primarily for AI. Apple spent just $12 billion, 1/10 of Amazon alone. So you might be thinking from all this that actually Apple is falling way behind all of the rest in AI, and to be fair, that is basically what everybody thought until now. And the reason for that is that the entire market basically assumes that owning your own AI infrastructure is basically mandatory if you want to be a big player. The thesis being, if you don't own the GPUs, you don't own the AI. But history says something very different. Now, there's a company called Sparkline Capital who ran the analysis on this, on basically every major capex supercycle since the 1800s. So that's railroads, telecom, the internet.com boom. And basically what they found is that asset-heavy companies consistently underperform asset light ones. So the companies that own all of the stuff have to maintain all of that stuff, and it's much more difficult for them to grow than a company like a software firm like Google or Meta or whoever else. And the current AI build out is already bigger than the internet boom relative to GDP. So the brutal math here is that big tech needs to make around $2 trillion in revenue by 2030 just to justify all the money they're spending. AI revenue today is about 20 billion. So it's a pretty big gap. Now, this is where Tim Cook becomes dangerous, because there's now a big shift in AI away from on-cloud AI onto on-prem. And you may have heard all of the hype about OpenClaw, which is an AI agent that can basically do anything for you, and it lives on your local system. Apple is selling out of all sorts of different hardware because people are buying them to set up their AI agents at home. What they're doing is selling the picks and shovels for this current gold rush. They didn't need to build all of the data centers because they've already thought ahead. Steve Jobs saw the silicon boom coming in 2008. He greenlit Apple Silicon. 10 years later, they crushed Intel. Now fast forward. Apple designs its own M series chips and keeps all of that AI spend that all of the other companies are investing as flexible operating expenditure. They're not now dependent on Nvidia. They don't have multi-billion-dollar GPU farms that they have to maintain. And they're not locked into all of this infrastructure that might well become obsolete. Actually, what they're doing is generating lots of free cash flow, returning money to shareholders, and becoming the bedrock of this explosion of localized AI through things like OpenClaw. If we are indeed moving into a world where everybody has not just an agent at home running their life, but also agents in the workplace, companies are having agents running their teams and giving all of their different employees, all of their different knowledge workers, their own personal AI assistant, which is probably the world we're moving into, then guess what? A lot of those agents are going to be running on Apple hardware. Why? Well, because everybody's already familiar with it. Apple already has the supply chains and the factories and already know how to build and sell this stuff. What's more, they're not running those factories, they are designing the computers, and again, they are being asset light. They don't need to set up all of this hard infrastructure. Furthermore, they already own the ecosystem. You're already using an iPhone, you're already using an Apple Watch, you've got them in your ears, on your wrist, in your eyes. Apple's everywhere. And so expanding AI across all of those devices is going to be easy. They don't care which model wins. They've just signed the rights to Siri, to Gemini, but prior to that, they were integrating ChatGPT, and I'm sure you will start to see the position as Apple's AI model of choice become prized in the same way that Google, being the search of choice for Safari, generated such huge revenue for Apple over so many years. Being the search provider of choice on Apple devices cost Google a hell of a lot of money, but they did it because they knew that they were getting value. Exactly exactly the same thing is going to happen as the AI model provider of choice on Apple devices. They don't need to burn cash trying to invent new AI. They simply license the real estate on their devices to the highest bidder. Therefore, while everybody else is spending money on capex building their own models, Apple is just charging for distribution. They didn't burn hundreds of billions on deprecating hardware. They're building their own hardware and licensing space on it to the AI providers. Apple hit $4 trillion in market cap, spending a tenth of what the other big players spend. If the AI capex arms race delivers the returns that Wall Street expects, then Meta, Google, Microsoft are all looking good. But if it plays out like any other infrastructure supercycle in history, guess what? Tim Cook just won. He outplayed the entire industry by doing nothing. So if there's a lesson here, I guess it's an eternal one, which is that sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Good job, Tim Apple.